Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Our guest today is Debra Honor. After having a lengthy career as a teacher with the Greater Essex County School Board, she decided to have a second successful career as a professional genealogist. Debra is currently the branch genealogist of the Bicentennial Branch of the United Empire Loyalist Association of Canada. As part of a local project to preserve the historic Belle Vue house, Debra researched the lives of the people who touched Belle Vue, which helps explain the importance of this building to the history of Amherstburg. Her book is titled The Lives That Touched Belle Vue, Amherstburg. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Why, thank you very much.
You know, I can't imagine that there's anyone living within miles of Amherstburg who has not driven by that amazing Belle Vue palace.
Palace is basically a farmhouse.
Yeah.
It's just been added on to over the generations and changed because styles change and people want to have a house that's more up to date. Mm-hmm. But it does look like a mansion now, doesn't it?
It really does. Intriguing as well. And there's so much to talk about. But what sort of attracted you to it, to write about it?
Well, we started a group back in 2008 of a local people in town that wanted to save Belle Vue. It was owned by a numbered company. And it looked like they were going to save it just for demolition by neglect. They weren't doing anything to save the property.
Were they a local numbered company?
Yeah, they are. And then the town bought it. We sort of talked them into it. And when they had a meeting with the town people, somebody said, somebody should write a book. And I said, I've already been researching the families. I'll write the book. But It took 14 years.
Oh, only the 14
only
years.
14 years. You know, there's life that happens and you don't have time to be writing the whole time.
Yes. And this kind of a book requires so much research.
It did.
Yeah. Now, the book starts out with the British Commissariat. Can you describe what that was, the British Commissariat?
Okay, the British Commissary is the name for the officer. And the officers wore uniforms, but they were civilian officers. So in other words, they didn't travel with the military. So when a British unit would come in, like the 41st Regiment or something, they would stay there for a few years and then they'd be reposted to another area. The commissary always stayed in their same area, but they were the ones who would order the food. They would order the material for their beds. They would, that stuff. They would not order the guns or the ammunition. That was a different department.
Who could join that commissary?
Well, you had to be able to know how to read and write. Because you were keeping track of everything. You had to itemize everything as to what came in, what came out, and how big. A loaf of bread was supposed to be a pound of bread a day and a pound of meat a day for each soldier a day.
Wow.
So that's a lot of bread to make. And so they were ordering from other bakeries. But he would also know this is how much wheat has to be ground into flour. This is how much flour you have to use so they don't cheat the military for their pound of bread.
Wow. So you did have to be pretty literate.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And they also wanted somebody who was socially acceptable.
Oh.
So they were part of what you would have classified as the family compact from the old days.
Right.
They were the rich ones.
Now, there's so many people associated with it. And so I thought I would sort of go through the book as these people appeared. And the first ones, the Reynolds family.
Yes.
They start it.
Well,
They start the book.
They start the book. Thomas Reynolds was the father, and he came from Scotland. His first two children were born in Scotland, and the next four, there was one that passed away as a baby, were born in Detroit, Michigan. And so Margaret was the first one, and then there was Thomas Augustus, and he joined the Royal Navy and ended up going over to England. And so then there was Ebenezer, Robert Reynolds, a baby that died, and then Catherine Reynolds. She was the youngest. And between Margaret and Catherine, there's about 20 years.
Wow.
In ages, yes. It's a big change.
Yes, absolutely. And so this was around the time of the Battle of Lake Erie?
With Thomas Reynolds, it was during the American Revolution. Robert Reynolds was born in 1780. So he's born just near the end of the American Revolution. Robert Reynolds himself, his father was the commissary, the Deputy Assistant Commissary General was his title. He was one step above clerk, okay?
Yeah.
So it's not a real high office.
Yeah.
And then Robert joined the commissary as a clerk. In 1811, his father died, and Robert Reynolds asked to replace his father. Well, mail took a long time to cross the ocean. And in England, they finally say, okay, you can have the job in 1813, right? So then the mail has to come back. Well, the War of 1812 started. They needed somebody to fill the job, so he got it anyways.
Now, so the first, who built it? Did the
Robert Reynolds.
He built it.
Robert Reynolds is the one who built it. His wife was Thérèse Bouchette, and she had been married before. She was a widow. Her first husband was the stepson of James McGill of Montreal,
Right.
who was the fur trader and who was very rich. And he had married his partner's wife because his partner had died, and she had had two sons. The second son married Thérèse, and but he was in the army. And he went down into the West Indies and was in a foolish duel and lost. So that's how she lost her husband. But they had one son, and his name was James McGill Trottier de Rivière. That's the whole French name.
Yep.
But they usually go by de Rivière nowadays.
And that's the McGill of McGill University.
He is the one who started McGill University.
So you also mentioned the Treaty of Ghent. And in my history books, when I learned about the Treaty of Ghent, I never sort of had any connection or read any connection to Belle Vue House. So tell us about why it's in here, in your book.
Okay. I'm going to tell you the truth. My husband worked at Fort Malden, and he tells me these things.
Well, isn't it nice to have a
somebody who knows what's
husband?
going on?
I
Yes.
know. Wow, it's really interesting, isn't it? How it, something that sort of mattered so much that ended up in general history books.
Well, the Treaty of Ghent would have been the end of a war,
Yes.
and I think it was the end of War of 1812.
12. Yeah. Now, you also talk about a General MacArthur. Who was he?
General MacArthur was the leader of the American forces in Detroit after we left Amherstburg. Fort Amherstburg was abandoned because they weren't able to take care of it. It was for them to get supplies, they would have to go through the lakes. Well, of course, they lost the Battle of Lake Erie. They had no way of getting any supplies. So they all retreated up to Burlington. So MacArthur was the general in charge of the American forces, and he was trying to take over Canada. So he's the one that tried to burn everything in our area, which...
A bad guy.
Bad guy,
Yeah.
He was even so mad at the Michigan people. He says, you like the Canadians too much. After I burn Amherstburg and Windsor, I'm going to come in after you. But the war ended, so he couldn't do it.
Now, I was also fascinated by the volcano of Mount Tambora.
Yes.
And how it affected this area.
It affected the world. It wasn't just our area.
Yeah.
But that was the summer that never came. Because of that volcano, the whole world was encapsulated with the smoke and the ash, and it covered up the sun. We didn't get any sun. So even in that summer of 1815, we had snow in the middle of summer. And so the crops were all burnt the year before, and here we are in 1815 and 16, and we have no way of getting food from someplace else because they're suffering just as much with this volcano going off.
It's amazing sort of when you think about what happens if we don't have enough sun.
Yes.
Nothing happens, only bad stuff.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, let's go back to, there's so many people, and it's really interesting to be able to sort of see, how they came to be important in this area, and particularly, of course, to Belle Vue. So Robert Reynolds had thousands of acres.
He bought 2,000 acres, and about 4 days later, he sold 1,000 of them to somebody else. So he had 1,000 acres. Because his family were considered loyalists, okay? His father also was given land down in the new settlement area, which is Colchester and Gosfield. So he had property down there. His two sisters asked for land because daughters could ask for land, and they were given land in Kent County.
Oh, wow.
And they never married, so Robert Reynolds got to take control over that property too.
The employees or the kinds of laborers and masons, and you write about them, they were pretty important.
They were the people who built Belle Vue had worked on all the ships in the Navy Yard. So the problem with when Belle Vue was being built after the war is that the government said, we're not going to have a Navy Yard in Amherstburg anymore. It's too close to Michigan. It's too close to the Americans. So they moved their naval place up to Penetanguishene.
Oh, wow.
To keep it away from the Americans. So you've got all these local people who are carpenters, and they don't have a job. And so he hires them to build Belle Vue, and that place is solid.
Then you talk about family connections. I know it's a lot of connections, but can you tell us about some of them?
The biggest connection is with the McGill family.
Yes.
So you've got James McGill, and then he has the grandson through Teresa and his stepson. So there's James McGill de Rivière, he finally goes by. He ends up getting a lot of the land that McGill owned in the northern part of Essex County. Oh, McGill owned a lot of land everywhere. He owned a lot over in Michigan as well.
Do you know how he made his money?
Through the fur trade.
Oh, right.
Through the fur trade, because he owned the Northwest Fur Trading Company.
Oh, that'll do it.
That'll do it, yeah. But Amherstburg was the first place that Molson, one of his connections, built a bank because there was so much money going through Amherstburg in the fur trade outside of Montreal.
There were a lot of siblings. Were they McGill siblings? Was Teresa?
Okay, Teresa was Robert Reynolds' wife.
Right.
They had 5 children. Only one survived. And that was Robert Todd Reynolds.
Oh, yes. He became a doctor.
So he was in the third or fourth graduating class of McGill University for medical students. And Fort Malden has his diploma, which is the earliest diploma known for McGill University. And it names the 4 professors that he had, much different than a diploma we have nowadays.
Yes, no kidding.
And it also tells what his dissertation was on. So he had to give a talk about some topic with the medicine.
What did he choose?
Enteritis.
Oh, I bet
Whatever
there would have been
that
a lot of that going around back in those days.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah. The painting of Belle Vue, this was done by Catherine Reynolds?
Was done by Catherine Reynolds. There were numbers on the pictures, okay? There was a picture for Catherine of Belle Vue from the back, not from the front. And then there's a picture done by her of her other brother, Ebenezer's house. And on the paintings were numbers, and the highest number was 6. She had sent at least 6 pictures, because there's no cameras in those days,
Right.
to the other brother in England, that Thomas Augustus Reynolds, who was in the Royal Navy. This is how well we're doing.
Wow.
So I have no idea what the other pictures are, but there are those 2. And the 2 pictures are at the DIA.
Wow. And you had a contact recently.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Okay. Well, from Robert Todd Reynolds' second family.
With the Newfoundlander.
With the Newfoundlander.
Yeah.
Yes. Her daughter married a Jaffrey. The Jaffrey was somebody who made up presentations for big parties. Okay, he was the party planner type of thing. They ended up in Chicago. They had children that married. Their daughter married a Pendergast, and then her daughter married a Carlisle. So just this afternoon, I got an email from one of the Carlisle children to say that he's really interested in the book and has bought the copies and has the original picture that Catherine Reynolds drew in pencil of Belle Vue. Now, I've seen photocopies of it because the DIA has a photocopy of it. They wouldn't sell it. And it's on his wall in a frame.
Must have been so interesting or exciting for you to hear that.
Oh, it really was.
Yeah.
It's nice to have these connections. For every family that has lived at Belle Vue, I've had a family connection. Somebody from that family has contacted me or has talked to me about it. And that's been sort of a nice treat. It's sort of, how do you put it? It sort of gives me credit for the work that I was doing.
Right. Now, so the Reynolds sold it to William Johnston?
William Johnston.
That was 1875. And where was he from? Like, how did he come in the picture?
He was born on the ship, supposedly from Ireland, coming over from Ireland with his family. They went to Toronto. Supposedly, they haven't quite figured this one out, but it could be that the parents died or they had too many children and they couldn't take care of all of them. And he and his sister ended up with Reverend Eliot, who was Matthew Eliot's son.
And Matthew Eliot?
Matthew Eliot was a Loyalist from this area, from Amherstburg.
Oh.
He was the superintendent of Indian Affairs. So whenever they had, before the War of 1812, when the British were giving presents, they would do it at Matthew Eliot's house, just south of Amherstburg. Okay? But anyways, Reverend Eliot took them in and had them educated, and William Johnston ended up going into being a druggist. Now, a druggist is different than a pharmacist.
Okay.
A druggist is somebody who makes the drugs.
Right.
A pharmacist is someone who dispenses the drugs. So that's the difference. But in those days, they didn't have people dispensing drugs. They just had people making drugs. He made one called sarsaparilla.
That became very popular.
It did. And he was in competition with Werner's.
Oh, yeah, the ginger ale guys.
The ginger ale guys. Because he also was a druggist, and that was his drug.
So that's how Werner's got started. Werner was a druggist.
Was a druggist.
Wow. The things you don't know.
Oh, really? Yeah. But it all ends up as ginger ale.
Yeah. Have you ever tasted sarsaparilla?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think I've had the candy sticks of it, sarsaparilla, but I've never had an actual drink of it.
Yeah. Dr. Todd Reynolds, he got himself in trouble with a doctor in the U.S., didn't he?
That was during the rebellion of 1837. Our area was attacked quite often. And one of the main attacks was the capture of the Anne. So they had the Patriots, they called themselves, over in the United States. A lot of them were Irish, as well as Americans who thought they could take over Canada. And one of them was a Dr. E.A. Feller. And he was the leader of this group. They took over Boblo Island for a while. And then they had taken over this ship, the schooner Anne, and they were going down the river and shooting at Amherstburg. And the soldiers in Amherstburg were shooting back. And the ship went aground because the person who was sailing it got hit by one of the gunshots. So Dr. Reynolds had just joined. It was 1838, 39. And he had joined in 36 with the military. So this is where he started his career. And he was told by the officer, take away all of their personal effects. Well, a year and a half later, he goes over to Detroit because they're used to going back and forth all the time. And he sort of runs into Dr. Feller, who beats him up and takes him to court because he wants his stuff back. Well, Dr. Reynolds doesn't have it because you give it to the commander. You don't keep it yourself. And but the court case was over in Michigan. So I now understand that statue of justice that has the blindfold on it with the weights.
Yeah.
So which side was he on? He was having the court case on the American side. So who's going to win?
Yeah.
It's going to be Dr. Feller.
For
because
sure.
He's out there telling everybody how bad Britain is and how they need to free these people in Upper Canada. And so he had to pay him back for all of the stuff that he took.
Oh, wow.
About $82, I think, worth, which would have been a lot of money in those days.
A lot of money. So now, after the Johnstons, what happened after they were no longer at Belle Vue?
The Johnsons sold it to Perry Lighton. Perry Lighton is a local person, and his wife was a Toffelmeyer. So two local names in the area. And he was a real estate agent and a farmer, and he really liked the Belle Vue property, so he bought it. And he didn't do a lot to it because William Johnston had done a lot of work on that house. And the road in front of the house was changed by the town to be farther away from the river. So closer to the house. So he went to change the land in front to sort of grade it to a different, found Indian burial grounds.
Oh, wow.
And it was full of lots of artifacts and things, but he loved archaeology. He wasn't what we would call an archaeologist these days. It was more just liked history.
Yeah.
But he took a whole bunch of that stuff and put it into these frames and all these things and used it as a museum in his house.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. But a lot of the stuff that he had, he died in 1905. His wife kept the house till 1925. Okay. A lot of the stuff that he had was bought by George F. MacDonald. I think that was his middle initial, who gave his collection to start the Windsor Museum.
My goodness.
So a lot of those Indian artifacts are now at the Windsor Museum.
And so what did the wife do with the house?
She lived in it.
And
she had 3 daughters, and one daughter became a nurse. So when she was being trained over in Detroit, she and another daughter went with her. The one daughter had married, and they were over there for the time that she was at school, and then they came back to the house.
And who lived in it after them?
Was the Mullins.
Right. And then the Mullins lived there for how long?
The Mullins were in their 70s when they bought the house. They had been living at the Gordon House, which is now the tourist information building. That's where they lived most of their career, most of their life. But they owned they bought Belle Vue in 1925 or 26. Mrs. Mullen knew the house because her father had been the bookkeeper for William Johnston.
Wow.
And I think she was the one who sort of pushed, we got to buy this house. Yeah. And they added a couple of second-story things over the bay windows and had servants with them. But they were in the house until she passed away in 1944.
And then we're almost out of time, but there's so much. So what happened after that?
After 1944, the war was ending, World War II. They needed a place for all the veterans that were, or the soldiers that were coming home to go to Westminster Hospital that needed medical treatment. So they were taking the World War I soldiers out who were in good condition. They just needed a place to live, a retirement home. And they opened up all these retirement homes. And Belle Vue was one that was actually bought by the Veterans Affairs. And so they brought these veterans from London, from Westminster Hospital to Belle Vue to live.
Okay, so the veterans, and then after the veterans,
after the veterans was the Ukrainian church.
Right. And then after Ukrainian church?
Then it was bought they sold it because they couldn't hold it anymore. They didn't have a big enough population. And it was given over to a numbered company.
What's happening to it now in about 30 seconds?
In about now, the town of Amherstburg owns it. They are deciding what to do with it because they've decided not to keep it. They want to sell it. And we're waiting to find out because they haven't told anybody yet.
Oh. Well, do you have hope for it?
There are days, and both ways.
Well, I'm so glad that you've preserved its history so well. Do you have a photographic memory? I mean, what you remember and the dates and the people off the top of your head is quite astounding.
Yeah, we'll ask my grade 1 students.
Oh. Thank you so much. This has been tremendous.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this too.
And unfortunately, that's it for another show here on Scribes and Songsters. Special thanks to our guest, Debra Honor. Go get her book. Thanks also to our producer, Brian Sweet, and our technical producer and editor, Gary Glass. Many thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. A special thank you to you for watching. I hope to see you soon right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.